The Oracles of Delphi, ancient Greece. Imagine traveling for days, maybe weeks, burning through your silver and your patience, all to ask a single question at a temple high in the Greek mountains. You walk into Delphi, heart pounding, incense heavy in the air, and there she is, the Pythia, the priestess of Apollo, sitting in a trance, breathing strange vapors rising from the earth. She whispers words you barely understand. Priests lean in, polish them up, and hand you an oracle that sounds divine but strangely convenient for their political friends. This was ancient Greece's most prestigious hotline to the gods and one of history's longest-running scams. From about the 8th century BCE through late antiquity, kings, soldiers, and common folk swore by Delphi. Whole wars stopped or started based on its prophecies. But modern science suggests the visions, likely triggered by ethylene gas seeping through cracks in the rock. The ambiguity of her words, carefully spun so no matter what happened, the temple won. If your campaign succeeded, Apollo was praised. If it failed, you must have misunderstood the god. No refunds. Think about it. The oracle became Google, Wall Street, and a political lobbyist rolled into one. By the peak, cities lined up with gold, sacrifices, and whole treasuries. Delphi grew rich by dealing in divine uncertainty. And the scam worked for centuries, until Rome rose, new religions spread, and people began asking harder questions. What lingers? The fact that human beings have always craved certainty in a chaotic world. And when certainty is scarce, someone clever will bottle the mystery, call it truth, and sell it back to you. The oracles of Delphi remind us, ambiguity is power, especially when it wears the mask of destiny. The Trojan Horse, c. 12th century BCE. Picture this, a city's been under siege for 10 years. Troy's walls stood tall, its people exhausted but undefeated. The Greeks were tired too. 10 years of fighting, no victory in sight. So instead of brute force, they pivoted to something far sneakier, the perfect con job. They rolled up to Troy's gates with a massive wooden horse. Not a gift basket, not a peace treaty, a horse. They pretended it was an offering to Athena and sailed away, leaving the Trojans to scratch their heads. Was this a trophy? A surrender? A blessing from the gods? Curiosity won. They dragged the horse inside their walls, celebrated, and drank like the war was over. But it wasn't a gift. It was a delivery system. Hidden in the hollow structure were Greek soldiers, armed and silent. In the dead of night, they slipped out, opened Troy's gates, and let their army flood back in. A decade-long stalemate ended in a single night, ruin disguised as tribute. Now historians debate if this was literal or metaphorical, maybe a siege tower, maybe just clever myth. But the lesson sticks. The Trojan Horse became the world's first recorded bait-hand switch. A symbol of how trust, once misdirected, brings collapse faster than armies ever could. And here's the long-term impact. 3,000 years later, the phrase Trojan Horse still defines hidden danger. Cybersecurity, politics, even relationships, we still use it to describe what looks friendly but carries a knife. It's the oldest reminder in history. Sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't sharper steel, but sharper psychology. Egyptian tomb raiding disguised as pious work. In ancient Egypt, death wasn't the end. It was the start of eternity. Pharaohs built colossal tombs stuffed with gold, jewels, perfumes, and even food, insurance policies for the afterlife. On the surface, priests and workers were guardians, sworn to protect these treasures for the souls of kings. But behind the incense and prayers, some were running one of history's earliest inside jobs. Picture it. By day, they polished statues and chanted hymns. By night, chisels scraped stone and hands reached into coffins. Gold rings, amulets, rare oils, lifted piece by piece, smuggled into thriving black markets along the Nile. Some raiders melted the loot, some passed it off as recycled offerings. Either way, the gods weren't the ones getting paid. We even have trial records from around 1110 BCE, during the reign of Ramses IX. Distressed tombs, broken seals, and stolen treasures pushed the state to interrogate workers. Written confessions detail how they split the spoils, bribed officials, and cloaked their thefts under a veil of religious duty. Imagine working as a divine caretaker one moment, and booking profits from eternity's gold the next. The outcome? Pharaohs doubled down on hidden tombs, building deeper chambers, elaborate traps, and curses carved into stone. But none of it stopped human greed. The Valley of the Kings became as much a crime scene as a sacred site. And here's the sting that lingers. For a civilization obsessed with preserving eternity, the treasures proved tragically temporary. Tomb raiding disguised as piety showed that even in the land of gods and afterlives, the real deity some served was profit. Roman coin debasement, 3rd century CE. In Rome, money wasn't just metal, it was trust. A silver denarius in your hand meant grain, oil, soldiers' pay, and the backbone of an empire. But by the 3rd century CE, emperors found themselves in a cash crisis. Endless wars, swollen armies, and palaces don't pay for themselves. So they pulled one of the oldest scams in economics, silent inflation by coin debasement. Instead of minting full silver coins, they mixed in cheaper metals, bronze, copper, even lead. To the naked eye, the coin still looked shiny. To the treasury, it stretched silver reserves further. And to ordinary Romans? Well, let's just say their silver was worth less every year. It started slow. Under Emperor Augustus, the denarius was about 95% pure silver. By the reign of Gallienus in the mid-3rd century, barely 5%. Imagine watching your paycheck melt from steak dinners to scraps, and you'll get the picture. Wages couldn't keep up, trade lost confidence, and inflation roared across the empire. Bread, wine, and rent soared while emperors pretended nothing had changed. This erosion of trust in money was more than a financial hiccup. It was systemic rot. Soldiers turned to plundering. Merchants demanded barter. Entire provinces doubted Rome's credibility. By the late empire, debasement wasn't a clever trick, it was a symbol of decline. And here's the kicker. Rome proved that when leaders tamper with trust, whether in temples or in coins, collapse is only a matter of time. Inflation isn't new. It's one of civilization's oldest scams, stamped right into the empire's currency. Still not convinced? Step into the comments. I'll be waiting there for a duel. The sale of fake relics, early Christianity. Imagine being a pilgrim in the 4th century. You've walked for weeks, blistered feet, heavy heart, desperate for a glimpse of the divine. When you reach a holy site, a smiling trader greets you. For just a small donation, you can take home a piece of heaven, a tooth from St. Paul, the finger bone of a martyr, maybe even a feather from the angel Gabriel himself. Sounds sacred? Well, also suspicious. As Christianity spread, so did its relic economy. Churches wanted holy objects to attract pilgrims. Pilgrims wanted tokens to bring them closer to God. Into this perfect demand walked clever merchants, blending faith with hustle. They dug up random bones from cemeteries, carved fragments of wood, and swore it came from the true cross. At one point, enough holy nails were circulating to pin Jesus to 10 crosses, not one. The trade exploded. Relics became currency. Cities competed to show who had the holiest collection. Rulers boasted relics to legitimize power. Meanwhile, ordinary believers emptied their purses for objects that promised blessings, healing, or forgiveness. Were all relics fake? No. Some bones, shrouds, and artifacts may have been genuine. But in a world without carbon dating, it was nearly impossible to tell truth from sales pitch. And that fog of faith was fertile ground for scams. The outcome? Relics changed history, fueling pilgrimages, building churches, and creating one of the medieval world's largest tourism industries. But they also showed how the human hunger for hope can be, well, monetized. Today, we call it merchandising. Back then, it was salvation for sale. Greek snake oil doctors, 5th century BCE. Picture the scene. Dusty roads of ancient Greece, markets buzzing, citizens swapping olives and gossip. Then enrolls a traveling healer with a cart full of jars, shimmering powders, and scrolls of secret knowledge. His pitch: one sip, one charm, one chant, and I'll cure your headaches, your heartbreaks, maybe even death itself. These were the snake oil doctors of their time. Some peddled herbs mixed with wine, others sold charms and whispered divine incantations. Many claimed their tonics came straight from Asclepius, the god of healing. In reality, most remedies were grape juice, honey water, and plenty of hopeful salesmanship. Now, not all ancient medicine was fraud. Hippocrates and real physicians were slowly building the foundations of science. But everyday people, especially outside big cities, often couldn't tell the difference between trained healers and fast-talking showmen. And in moments of pain or desperation, belief was as powerful as any drug. The scam thrived because it delivered something priceless: hope on demand. Even if the potion didn't heal, the ritual gave people comfort. And for the salesman, it paid in drachmas, meals, and local fame. The outcome? This pattern hasn't died, only evolved. From miracle tonics advertised in medieval fairs to modern detox teas on Instagram, the same formula works. Dress up ordinary products in mystery, promise instant results, and watch belief do the rest. The Greek snake oil doctors remind us of one bitter truth. People have always been willing to purchase health in a bottle, especially when fear meets slick persuasion. Spoiler, it usually ends the same way: some relief in the heart, but little in the body. The Sibylline Books scam, ancient Rome. Let's roll back to early Rome, long before emperors and marble forums, back when kings ruled the city. One day, a mysterious old woman appeared before King Tarquin the Proud. In her hands, 9 books. Not just any books. She claimed these scrolls held prophecies straight from the gods themselves. Divine guidance for Rome's future. Her price? Astronomical. Tarquin laughed and refused. So, she burned 3 of the books in front of him. Gone forever. Then she calmly offered him the exact same price for the 6 that remained. He refused again, mocking her. Without a word, she burned 3 more. Now only 3 scrolls survived. She looked him in the eye and, once again, demanded the same price. This time, Tarquin caved. What had just happened? The king paid full price for 1/3 of what he could have had. And the lesson was burned into history. Scarcity sells. Those surviving scrolls, the Sibylline Books, were kept under guard in the capital, consulted during wars, plagues, and crises. Priests flipped them open whenever Rome needed divine direction. Irony? Their grip on power, their authority, all began with a clever hustle on a king's pride. The long-term impact? Rome enshrined prophecy into politics. The loss of burned scrolls only increased their mystique. This scam wasn't just a transaction. It was a masterclass in marketing, perceived value created by destruction. Fast forward 2,500 years, and the playbook remains the same. Limited editions, product drops, concert tickets that sell out in seconds. It all traces back to an old woman teaching Rome. Sometimes the fewer there are, the more people will pay. By the way, guys, please don't make me beg. No, forget it. I am begging. Subscribe now. I'm breaking my back making these for you. Skip it, and the next scam I expose might just be you. Okay, now back to topic. Han Dynasty alchemists and Immortality Pills. In ancient China, death wasn't just feared. It was the ultimate enemy. Emperors ruled lands, armies, and riches, but mortality still loomed. So when alchemists showed up whispering secrets of immortality, offering heaven in the form of a pill, those rulers were ready to pay any price. These elixirs of eternal life came packed with exotic ingredients: powdered jade, crushed pearls, rare herbs, even doses of mercury and arsenic. Yes, poisons. But alchemists sold the pitch beautifully. The rarer, the deadlier, the holier. Drink this and live forever. The reality? A faster death. The Han Dynasty saw emperors bankroll these magicians like biotech startups. Factories of furnaces churned out shimmering pills. Court officials watched in awe as emperors swallowed what was basically glittering poison. Many rulers, including later Tang and Song monarchs, likely died from immortality treatments. Eternal life? More like an express ticket to the ancestors. But why did the scam work? Because it played to a desperate truth. The more powerful someone became, the more terrified they were of losing it. Fear plus hope equals the perfect market. And alchemists thrived, growing wealthy while emperors grew sick. The long-term lesson? Humans have always chased longevity like a commodity, whether in jade dust, fountain of youth myths, or today's billionaires funding anti-aging labs. The names change, the dream stays the same. Han China proves this eternal paradox. People will risk dying early if it means not dying at all. And for the alchemists, that meant eternal profits, if not eternal life. The Greek Olympic athlete fixes. When we picture the ancient Olympics, we imagine pure glory. Muscular athletes, marble temples, competing for the honor of the gods. Reality check? By the 4th century BCE, Olympia was less about honor and more about hustling. Bribery, betting, and behind-the-scenes deals ran just as hot as the sun over that dusty stadium. Athletes desperate for fame and fortune sometimes cut secret pacts with rivals. You take the fall this round, I'll split the winnings. Spectators, meanwhile, poured silver into bets, thinking they were gambling on skill, but many were really tossing their coins into a rigged game. How do we know? Ancient records mention fines, scandals, and even statues erected to shame cheaters. Imagine walking into the sanctuary and seeing a lineup of stone inscriptions, public receipts of athletes busted for taking bribes. It was the original doping ban list, carved in marble. And the stakes were massive. Winning the Olympics meant eternal honor, political power, even free meals for life back home. That temptation opened the door to corruption, and where there's glory, there's always someone ready to sell it. The outcome? The games lost some of their sacred shine, but they didn't die. Instead, scandals revealed a timeless truth. Sports aren't just contests of muscles. They're contests of money, influence, and human weakness. Fast forward 2,300 years. Match-fixing scandals, performance-enhancing drugs, multi-billion-dollar betting. Same story, new jerseys. When it comes to athletics, Olympia didn't just give us competition. It gave us the first sportsbook scams. Vegas has nothing on ancient Greece. Pharaoh's pyramid, labor promises. When you think of the pyramids, you picture precision stonework, cosmic alignments, and pharaohs preparing for eternity. But behind those monuments was something far less glamorous. The workers, thousands of them, hauling blocks in desert heat. And they weren't slaves like the movies often suggest. They were hired laborers, promised daily wages in the Egyptian currency of choice, bread and beer. Sounds like a pretty sweet deal. Except the paychecks didn't always clear. Records scratched onto ostraca, pieces of limestone, tell us workers often got shorted. Instead of the promised rations, teams walked away with reduced portions, late payments, or supplies that never matched what was advertised. The first ever project managers pulling the oldest trick in the book, overpromise, underdeliver. When those rations fell short, workers pushed back. In fact, one of the world's earliest recorded labor strikes happened in Egypt. Construction crews literally downed tools until they got what was owed. Imagine the scale. A pyramid half-built, tens of thousands staging a sit-in, chanting not for freedom, but for more carbs and booze. The outcome? Rations were sometimes corrected, but the scam was baked into the system. The pharaohs got their pyramids, and the workers kept toiling, just rarely with all the bread and beer they were promised. The long-term echo? It shows that workplace scams aren't modern at all. From underpaid pyramid builders to today's unpaid overtime emails, the struggle between labor and lofty promises is carved as deep as the Sphinx's gaze. And let's be honest, project managers could learn a thing or two from Ramses' HR department. The Roman Catalan conspiracy, 63 BCE. Ancient Rome wasn't short on politicians with flashy promises, but few matched Lucius Sergius Catilina, better known as Catalan. In 63 BCE, he pitched himself as the champion of the people. His platform? Canceling debt. To the poor, drowning under loans, this sounded like salvation. To the elites, it was chaos disguised as reform. But behind the speeches, Catalan wasn't building justice. He was building a coup. He quietly bribed senators, promised offices to friends that didn't exist, and rallied desperate men with pledges of wealth he couldn't deliver. His plan? Ignite uprisings across Italy, assassinate rivals in Rome, and seize power by force. What stopped him? One man, Cicero, the consul at the time. Through a mix of sharp intelligence work and sharper oratory, Cicero exposed a plot in the Senate. The so-called Catilinarian conspiracy became one of the most famous busts in political history. Catalan fled, rallied an army, but was killed in battle soon after. His followers, many of them senators, were executed. The outcome? Debt cancellation never came. Instead, Rome got a chilling reminder of how fragile its republic really was. To some, Catalan was a reckless traitor. To others, he looked like a populist daring to challenge an unfair elite, a figure strangely resonant in any age. The long-term impact? Catalan's scam showed that even in a republic celebrated for law and order, politics could be gamed with promises, payoffs, and performative outrage. The tools haven't changed much. Only the stages and microphones have. Babylonian astronomer priest predictions, c. 500 BC, 500 years before the Common Era. Babylon was legendary for two things: its towering ziggurats and its sky watchers. Astronomer priests tracked the heavens night after night, marking every eclipse, star alignment, and wandering planet. To the people, these weren't just scientific notes. They were divine messages, forecasts of wars, famines, even the rise and fall of kings. And here's where the con slipped in. Sometimes, the priests did predict future eclipses with surprising accuracy. The Babylonians were brilliant sky calculators. But other times, they leaned on a trick still common today: retroactive prophecy. Something bad happens, a famine, a rebellion, or a war. And suddenly, the priests find an omen in their tablets that seems to have predicted it all along. Divine foresight? More like data massaging. The result? Whatever happened looked like part of the god's plan, conveniently validated by the priesthood. This technique kept spiritual power and the political favor that came with it, flowing straight to temple coffers. Kings relied on priests before battle. Farmers sought their blessing before planting. If the prediction flopped, easy save. You must have misinterpreted the stars. If it landed, proof of divine authority. Heads they win, tails you lose. The outcome? A society where celestial charts became political leverage. The long-term impact? This marriage of data, mysticism, and spin set a pattern that echoes all the way to today, where statistics, forecasts, and models can still be bent to fit the narrative of those in power. Babylon reminds us of a timeless truth. When you mix knowledge with authority, the line between science and scam can vanish as quickly as a shadow across the moon. Divine messages in animals. In ancient Rome, every big decision, war, elections, building a road, came with a strange ritual. Ask the birds first. Priests called augurs would study the flight of crows, the guts of chickens, even the way a pigeon pecked at grain. From these little signs, They claimed to read the will of the gods. Divine guidance, feathered and delivered. Sounds mystical. In reality, it was often politics wearing a bird costume. If a senator wanted a law passed, suddenly the omens sang yes. If he wanted to stall a rival, bam, the chickens refused to eat, the gods say no. Property disputes, land rights, even wars could be settled not by logic, but by an augure's interpretation of animal innards. Talk about high-stakes guesswork with feathers and guts. And here's the scam. Omens were vague by design, like a weather forecast that always says cloudy with a chance of divine wrath. If events turned out favorably, the augurs claimed accuracy. If not, well, the gods changed their minds. Meanwhile, the priests kept their prestige, and their patrons got the political edge they wanted. The outcome? Augury became entrenched in Roman identity, a state-sponsored way of blending faith with control. The long-term impact is sly. It shows how people in power can use any system, whether statistics, polls, or pigeon guts, to dress politics as fate. So the next time you roll your eyes at shady lobbying or rigged surveys, remember, at least nobody today is losing land rights because the sacred chicken skipped lunch. Medieval indulgence sellers, tickets to heaven. By the Middle Ages, faith wasn't just personal, it was currency. And few scams turned belief into business, quite like indulgence selling. Here's how it worked. The church taught that sins stacked up like debt. But instead of interest rates, you faced purgatory. Enter indulgences, pay a fee, fund a holy cause like a crusade or cathedral, and in return, receive forgiveness neatly stamped on a parchment. Basically, a get-out-of-purgatory-sooner card. At first, the idea was simple, charity as penance. But it quickly spiraled. Priests and popes realized they could bankroll armies and basilicas by pitching these documents like concert tickets. Some went further, hawking indulgences door to door, claiming they covered not only you, but relatives, even the dead. A few supersellers all but promised entry to heaven with a receipt. And people bought it. Entire villages scraped coins together, convinced they were paying down eternity. Imagine the fear and relief. Drop gold today, erase sins tomorrow. Hope monetized. But the scam grew so big it cracked the system. By the 16th century, critics like Martin Luther called it out. His famous 95 Theses were basically a mic drop against indulgence sales. That protest didn't just dent the scam. It sparked a reformation, splitting Christianity in half. The outcome? One of the most profitable spiritual hustles in history ended up reshaping Western religion forever. But it left behind a timeless warning. When forgiveness gets a price tag, it starts sounding less like salvation and a lot more like sales. The Spartan cryptia, fear is a scam. Sparta is often remembered as the warrior state. Boys whipped into soldiers, men hardened by discipline. But hidden beneath the helmets was a darker system of control. The cryptia. Who were the targets? The helots, enslaved farmers who made up the majority of Sparta's population. Helots grew the food, built the wealth, and outnumbered Spartans by as many as 10 to 1. That's not stability, that's a ticking time bomb. So Spartan leaders spun an elegant scam. They told helots they were divinely inferior, fated by the gods to serve. Every year, Ephors, the magistrates, declared ritual war on the helot population. That gave young Spartan warriors legal cover to form secret death squads, sneaking into villages at night, assassinating potential leaders, spreading terror like a shadow government. The brilliance, if we can call it that, was psychological. The violence was real. But what really cemented obedience was the belief behind it. Helots grew up convinced rebellion was hopeless, that divine will, not just Spartan swords, kept them in chains. It was fear disguised as fate. The outcome? The system worked for centuries. The helots fed Sparta while Spartans trained for endless war. But it also meant Sparta was forever paranoid. When helots did rise up, the rebellions were brutal and bloody. The lasting impact? The cryptia wasn't just murder in the night. It was one of history's earliest examples of institutionalized psychological warfare. By turning fear into religion, the Spartans proved you don't always need walls or weapons to control people. Sometimes, you just need the right story. All right, I've laid down the history. Now I'm bored, so let's stir the pot. Come find me in the comments for a duel of wits and sarcasm.